Anyway.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, speaking of Palestine protests,
Yes.
Palestine protests, rather. Sorry, I said Palestine. I think Palestine protests. Did you see that people are getting mad on the internet about the fact that people are planning a pro-peace march, a march for a ceasefire on Remembrance Saturday, right?
Hang on. Whoa. So the okay. So the Remembrance Saturday, where we remember that war is bad,
And the
right?
people dying in war is bad, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we should always strive towards peace so that we don't have to repeat the actions of what
yeah,
happened
yeah,
in the
yeah.
First and Second World Wars.
That would be apparently an inappropriate time to have a peace march.
Yep, Alex Phillips from Reform UK is going to go down and defend the cenotaph.
What?
Apparently,
What are they
it's
going
a
to do
risk
to
of
the
being, yeah,
cenotaph? What are they going to do
yeah,
to the cenotaph?
yeah. It's going to have graffiti, or I don't know. I don't know what they think is going to
They'll
happen to the
probably
cenotaph.
they'll say mean words to it, won't they?
Yeah, for
They'll
sure, for
hurt the
sure. Oh yeah,
feelings of the cenotaph, and we don't want that.
It's just because the problem is, right. The big problem is, I was going to do a big kind of segment about this, but I guess now we're on the subject. I should probably just go into it now and see what your opinions on this are.
Let's
Right?
go.
Is that we're in poppy season with a conflict that could potentially spill out
Oh
into
yeah,
a much wider regional
the
conflict where
flower.
loads of people have died already.
Yeah, the flower nonces are out in full force. Did you see
Right.
30p Lee doing his thing? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, well done. You can clip a thing to your lapel. Bravo. I don't
I know,
care.
and it's like it's fine. Go ahead, do what you want,
Yeah,
right? But
exactly. Yeah.
these people virtue signaling with it are infuriating, right? Because the thing is that you rightly point out it's a symbol of peace. It's a symbol of the fact that people don't die in war for their country; they just die,
Yep.
right? Peace is something we should all be striving for, and we do it right. The Poppy Appeal and the Remembrance Weekend it's commemoration, right? Whereas I've
Yes.
seen many people describe it as a celebration of the sacrifice. I'm like, no, that's not how commemoration works, right? This is
Celebration. I mean, I don't know about you. When I think about those, the sea of blood wasted in Flanders Field, so to speak, I don't think get the party poppers out. Let's have a mad one for it. No, it's
yeah,
not celebration. It's literally the worst thing that can happen. What?
it's literally the worst thing that can happen. And because I saw right, it was going viral. One
Yeah,
of the guys shared it on Twitter. There's an account on Twitter called Poppy Watch,
I follow it
which
with glee every year. Yes.
yeah, because it tweets out some of the more elaborate poppy displays that
Yeah.
people have, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that I think the tweet I put out is like I think there are plenty of people who just view the whole poppy appeal with some kind of scorn, and I dislike these people. And it's clear that the point of it is really important. It's something we should always strive for. My dad, right, sorry, not my dad, my grandfather, sorry, my grandfather was in the RAF during the Second World War, right? I know what the kind of things that his service was meant for.
Yes.
And I believe in the cause of the Second World War, right? It was a cause so great that it managed to get the Soviet Union and the United States to collaborate with each other. That's how important it was as a conflict.
Yes.
And so having the nature of this, I feel it gets sullied. I think the actual post that they put out was a picture of some display which had about 1,000 poppies covering like everything of like park benches and street signs and everything, with a post box with a knitted serviceman's head with a plane flying on top of it,
Jesus
and like
Christ.
like two Lancaster bombers either side of it. And I'm like, people genuinely were like, because the problem is, right, is that I think that there are a lot of people on the right who misunderstand why we tweet about this stuff, why we get angry with this stuff. Because I don't know many leftists, right? I know some leftists, but I know many leftists who treat the entire poppy appeal with disdain. Because I think there are people who do that. I don't agree with them. I think it's really important, right? I think that what it stands for is important. But they think that any amount of our criticism of the level of ridiculousness that it gets to, the poppy appeal, they literally people flooding the comments saying, I can't believe you hate Britain. You despise our heritage. Why don't you live in another country if you hate the history of this country so much? I'm like, no, I think that I think it was good. My problem isn't the fact that people believe in poppies or wear poppies, right? Hence this idea that Lee Anderson can have that somehow that he doesn't care who knows that he's wearing a poppy. No one minds that you wear a poppy, right? Everyone's happy for you to wear a poppy.
Yeah.
Because we agree with what it stands for. But you've misplaced what we think. You seem to think that everybody who dislikes the grandiose, ridiculous nature of what lengths people go to with the Poppy Appeal campaign, whether instead of having it being a somber commemoration of one of the worst tragedies in modern history, right? It becomes a dick measuring contest for people to prove how patriotic they are, to prove how jingoistic they are, and that we forget that it's about making sure that veterans from those wars have all of the treatments they need, right? That they're not homeless. America has a huge problem with homeless veterans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but go on. So go on. Now finish your point.
And it's just us disagreeing with what they've turned it into.
Yeah.
They view it as us hating what it was originally for and everything that it represents. And I think we need to have some serious conversations with ourselves and also people on the right in general about how we portray our opposition to the kind of things that happen.
Yes, I have a lot of sympathy with what you've kind of staked out there. I think I'd probably be a little more sympathetic to those on the left who treat it with a certain kind of disdain, not because of what it was originally intended to be, but the kind of bastardization of the not celebration, the commemoration of the sacrifice that people have made. For Americans watching, and I will just explain briefly, the reason that we have it on the 11th of November is on the basis of the armistice at the end of the First World War, and it's meant to commemorate everybody who's died in war, right? And that's exactly what the cenotaph is, the statue in London and all the rest of it. It's meant to be sombre. It's meant to be a kind of a way of giving money to the good cause, right, and wearing a poppy as a kind of symbol of support to people, even if you don't necessarily know that they're veterans or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of beautiful. Like, the money is not the problem for me. I always give what is now is £2, isn't it? It used to be £1 because I'm old and inflation is a thing. But I don't wear the poppy myself, and I understand a lot of leftists who feel disdain towards it because it's become a jingoistic, like you say, dick measuring contest. Who can have the biggest poppy? Who can wear the poppy the most proudly? Who's if anyone dares to go on a TV show without one, there are loads of complaints from gammon twats. They've turned it into, I mean, from their perspective, it is a celebration. It's a nationalist circle jerk. That's what they've turned it into. And that's a disgrace. In the same way that people have taken like the St. George's flag or whatever and turned it into this horrific symbol of nationalist separation and division. I mean, we saw recently the pro-Palestine marches when they had those, they have like a Palestine flag. And the same gammon twats will come out and say, well, our guys didn't fight and die so you could disgrace the cenotaph. Forgetting, of course, that about 2.5 million Muslims have fought in the British and or colonial services over the course of that time. So that's also there for Muslims as well. That sort of thing. Yep. That kind of divide, that kind of nationalist hatred is what that has become, in part, to symbolise. And so I understand why certain leftists feel the way that they do. Now, I agree. On the basis of optics, it's an atrocious thing. It doesn't look good. It's in the same way that the right play this kind of shell game with things like All Lives Matter or It's Okay to be White. They stake out positions that are basically unattackable to a normie. And in order to explain that to them, you have to go into a level of analysis that they're not really capable of following. So the right stake out a position that is basically infallible to the mind of the average person, especially when it's pushed relentlessly by the media, as is so often the case. We saw that with John Blee Cromlins and all the rest of it.
Well, they got out their protractors to measure how much he'd bowed, right?
Yeah.
Discussing the value of the coat that he wore to the cenotaph.
Well, that's
David Aronovich, looking at you.
Yeah, that's a well-worn tactic because people, old heads, may remember back in the day when Michael Foot, back in the 1980s, who was the kind of last genuinely left-wing... Actually, no, John Smith was all right. Let's say the last out and out socialist, if you want to call him that, to be the leader
Yeah.
of the Labour Party back in the 1980s. Very unsuccessfully, unfortunately. He wore what was described as a, quote, donkey jacket to a cenotaph memorial, and the right wing absolutely annihilated him. And so that's David Aronovich is very much doing a kind of rinse and repeat on an old meme against the left. And this is the point, is it's being weaponised against the left as well. And we needn't fall into that gap, into that trap, I should say. If... And again, I've got family members who are service people as well, so I understand it from an emotional point of view. And I understand it from a kind of a genuine kind of moral point of view, in a sense. But also, it's not even about that. Even if you're a leftist who hates everything that it's become, you know it's not a winner. So at best, ignore it.
That's the thing, is that because I think the group of people who I really sneer at isn't even actually leftists, really. It's the kind of the middle class liberal types who feel like they're above.
Yeah.
They feel like they're above, like even like the basic nature of it, because they feel so kind of removed from what it originally meant. And I get that position, but the way how snarky they are towards people about it, rather than actually properly confronting the disconnect that we feel ideologically from what it's become. Yeah. And what's interesting as well is that you can tell that the people who do still have this weird kind of jingoistic connection to what the poppy appeal signifies, but you can tell how they've become nationalistic rather than a broader commemoration of the sacrifice and towards a more peaceful and less conflicting world. Yeah. Is that they can then disagree with people marching near the cenotaph, not even like deliberately at the cenotaph, but near the cenotaph, to say maybe that we shouldn't have a genocide right now. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't have ethnic cleansing. Maybe babies shouldn't be being killed by Israeli airstrikes or indeed by Hamas militias. And we should be trying to negotiate a peaceful settlement to ensure that the sacrifices of those wars that it commemorates shouldn't happen again. But because it's not British people dying, right? Because it's not British people dying, they don't care. They don't care, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's that's why you know there is this huge disconnect between two completely different viewpoints of what's going on here, right? Because if they did fully still believe in the original meaning of what it's supposed to mean, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't care about whether they were near the cenotaph.
Well, part of the problem, and this is internecine nonsense, I guess, from a British point of view, part of the problem is the poppy appeal themselves. The British Legion, who run that appeal, the official kind of arbiters of it all, made a rod for their own back. Because, like you say, it was initially meant as a kind of, ironically, a celebration of peace, really. A kind of... maybe we can all be a family of nations around the world and we don't have to see ourselves as enemies and all the rest of it. Although never explicitly about peace. But that was clearly the understanding of it. Until, of course, it got co-opted by a number of other military causes and connected to it. And so you then had what began the white poppy sort of revolution in the poppy thing. Which, for those who don't know, there's also a white poppy with the word peace written on it, which is a thing that's often used by anarchists and communists and I was supposed to say peaceniks. That's not the right fucking phrase. Conscientious objectors and all the rest of it, right?
Even then, it wasn't originally that either. It originally was just an alternative for people who wanted to specifically be about peace. It was from the Peace Pledge Union, and this was in the interwar period, right? The white poppy predates the Second World War.
Yeah,
that's how old.
No, but that's what I mean. It's because
and it wasn't even necessarily a leftist thing. It was
not at all. Absolutely,
an alternative.
Yeah. Because there were a lot of right-wing people who didn't want to get involved because they'd seen the slaughter of the First World War. They were kind of non-interventionists, rightly or wrongly. Obviously, historically speaking, very much wrongly, but regardless, it's all right. It's very easy to be right in hindsight. Yeah, the British Legion refused to make it officially kind of about peace, and so that white poppy thing began to grow as a movement because they essentially betrayed the memory of those people. They betrayed the memory of those who fought in the First World War, and indeed it's there to commemorate people who died in all wars, of course.
Yes, indeed.
But specifically the First World War, which is such a futile slaughter, and so to not make that about peace, to specifically stake out the position that this is not, in order to gain some kudos amongst the 4 people who give a fuck about it being strictly non-political. Shut the fuck up. You're happy to do fucking march-by parades with military organisations, okay? With military units. That's paid for with taxpayer money. That's political. Don't pretend you're completely apolitical. You could come out in support of peace as a way of not just celebrating the memory and commemorating the people who died, but also protecting current service personnel who otherwise might be sent out to die in the same fucking horrible ways.
And it's also incredible for people to say, well, I can't believe you're making war and peace political. These 2 things that are literally innately political, right? How can you have a non-political war? What on earth is that, right? Like, doesn't make any... These positions these people hold are completely untenable.
Absolutely ludicrous, yeah. But that's... I mean, like I say, they were hijacked by, ironically, militarism. By militaristic people who were the very people it was there to try and in some way overcome, I suppose. But there we go. That's sort of that. And again, I don't think the left does itself a great deal of good service by, like I say, rising to the bait, because that's what it is. It's nationalist bait.
100%, yeah.
I agree. The elephant trap is clearly laid out with a sign that says "massive fucking elephant trap," and yet some leftists continue to happily swan dive into the trap every fucking year, and it's silly. It doesn't make us look good. It doesn't really prove that much of a point, because anyone who actually observes it and looks at it with any kind of analysis will understand, oh, that's exactly what's going on. It's become this nationalist circle jerk. So you're not actually changing anyone's mind with this, other than making people think, oh, you're a bit of a twat, mate. What are you doing? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it gets so misconstrued to the point where people will literally take our point of maybe don't turn it into a virtue signaling contest, right? But this point that we make, and they can look at what we say and they can interpret it as we despise Britain, we despise the country's values and its heritage, when none of these things really are true. Maybe they're true for like some like hyper intellectualized, like middle class liberal types, but most leftism that we believe is on a sense of fundamental value that we feel is under which we feel is being violated by the level to which it's become jingoistic and the way that it's become a competition and it's become a celebration rather than a commemoration, which is our whole point, right? But you're right, it is a gigantic bear trap and we shouldn't fall into it. I actually mentioned this on stream a few days ago, I think it was, because I was pointing out like the absolute gigantic, like mind-bending irony it's going to be of people wearing poppies telling us that we shouldn't be wanting a ceasefire, and then kind of glorifying the idea that loads of Palestinian children are going to die and how necessary it is. Right? It's going to be so jarring to see that. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to wear a poppy when these people are? So I'm going to wear a white poppy. And I've actually realised, no, that's not the position. I'm going to retread my steps on this one. I will still wear a white poppy because I think that the cause for peace is justified. But that technically should be part of what the red poppy means as well.
Yes.
And rather than refusing to participate as a distancing from the people who I believe are undermining the original point of the poppy appeal, I was like, no, we should start reclaiming it. As I mentioned, right, I'm related, or I was related, I guess, to service personnel who literally, exactly, there you go, wearing both poppies, right? To remember the fact that, the colleagues of my grandfather died during the war to protect the world from fascism.
Well, that's right? The thing. We talk about anti-fascism. Those guys, whether their politics were perfect or not, were the most active and successful, effective anti-fascists who have ever existed.
Yeah.
That's
so I think that if I'm going to take something away from this, is whilst I will wear a peace pledge poppy, I will still wear. I'm going to change. I'm going to wear like the red poppy because I think that it's worth reclaiming. It's very important as a symbol and as a message and as part of our history. Right. I'm not proud of many things this country's done, but beating fascism in the Second World War, putting aside the bloc politics of East versus West, capitalism versus communism, to beat the evil of fascism, or at least to delay it for 75 years until Suella Braverman came into office.
Yes, yeah.
That is something that we should be proud of, and we should be taking steps to think about how we shouldn't allow these things to happen again. Never again, literally meaning never again for anybody. Indeed, that should include Palestinians.
Indeed, because they are humans, and that is the point. Yeah, you make some interesting points. Definitely, I'm going to have a little think about that in the background, so to speak. But I think one point that we kind of skirted around, or not skirted around, but touched on briefly, which I think is worth reiterating, and it draws us into the kind of present day, as it were, is the way in which certain media illiterate twats, or just generally reprehensible individuals, will say, not just refuse to condemn Hamas, but actively will support Hamas, and therefore allow bad faith actors on the other side to point to everybody who opposes the Zionist plans as, look, you're just like those people, you're all anti-Jewish, you're all anti-Semitic pieces of shit, etc., etc. The people who you refer to there as being kind of anti-British or in some way hating this country or this place, its heritage and all the rest of it, are people who can be exploited by the right wing in the same way. The bad faith actors like Lee Anderson or whoever can point to them and say everybody who has anything bad to say whatsoever about any element of British history or the poppy appeal or whatever, including current ongoing military operations that the British government are involved in, or the British Army are involved in, are exactly like these people. They're all, you can always, the extremists need the other extreme to point at as the threat. And we don't want to become that. We don't want to become the thing that Lee Anderson points to and says, look, they're all like this person.
Yeah. I absolutely agree, 100%. Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, you don't have to necessarily go out and buy yourself like all of the poppies in the world.
No.
Like you just need. I think we just need to have a conscientious think about the rhetoric that we employ and the way we position our arguments, right? Whereas having a laugh at the people who have poppies bigger than their own heads is funny. Like it's not. I'm not saying that it isn't funny because
it's not. For me, it's not size; it's quantity. If you've got someone who's got like 1,000 poppies and they decorate the entirety of the outside of their house, that honestly, that makes me disgusted and laugh at the same time.
Yeah,
it's a bit. It's weird.
Funny.
Yeah, it's odd that. The big ones are kind of funny, though. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it's exactly the same kind of personal mindset behind these people that goes into those people who always want to turn Christmas lights into a competition.
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's keeping up with the Joneses type stuff. If your poppy isn't big enough, then clearly you don't love the country. If you don't have 1 million poppies and Dave's got 1,000,001 poppies, does that mean he loves the country more? Fuck that noise. Give me 2 more poppies. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's why it turns into a dick measuring contest.
Yep.
It's why it turns into a virtue signaling competition, where when it becomes a symbol of how much you value your own country, how much you commemorate, right? Then suddenly we can't have like a normal occasion when, as we both said, it should be somber, it should be sad, right? I mean, it's something that you should bring everybody together in commemoration for something terrible, when we can't come together if we're all competing with each other.
Well, exactly. That's what I always remember, when the 2-minute silence, which again for Americans, Armistice Day, 11 minutes past 11, on the 11th of the 11th, we have a 2-minute silence, which is there to commemorate and to think upon things. And I'm always drawn to the First World War, naturally, because that's when it started, and the kind of pointless slaughter of it all. And some of the statistics that come out of it, the extra number of thousands that died in the first day of the Somme, and you can literally measure human lives with the number of minutes that pass and stuff. It's really, really grim. And for me, that makes me think, actually, we need to avoid that. That wasn't a good thing that happened. These people lost their lives for no good reason. The Second World War, you can argue, is for a very good fucking reason, but the First World War especially horrific, pointless, imperialist slaughter for the good of about 12 people, basically. And that's what I try and remember, because for me that matters. But for some people, you kind of think they get kind of hard at the thought of it. And that's really unsettling as to the mindset behind those kind of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that, whereas I think there are plenty of kind of actual peacenik types who refuse to admit that there is ever a situation where you might be appeasing too much. And of course, I think these people are very ill-advised, right? But it seems obvious to me, like when you look at something like the Israel-Palestine conflict, this is something that has to get solved through political negotiation and through peaceful means. Because the only people who benefit from continued animosity and from continued conflict are the right wings of either side, are the warmongers on either side. Right? Nobody wins because all of the people who do want continued conflict are Hamas and Likud and
Boeing
Ben Gvir.
and
Yeah.
Raytheon, etc. Yeah.
I mean, that's true. That's true.